Doom 2016 is a modern reboot of the classic and dearly beloved franchise of the same name, set out to recapture the spirit of the old games and expand on their concepts with a new generation of hardware. Now, chances are, given that the game released in 2016, you've either played it for yourself or you at least know about it, especially with Doom Eternal right around the corner. But lateness aside, I thought it would be fun to make my own review of Doom 2016 just for shits and giggles. And if you haven't experienced Doom for yourself, maybe I can learn you a thing or two about one of the single greatest first-person shooters to come out in recent years. Doom 2016 was developed by id Software, a dev that helped popularize the FPS genre, and published by Bethesda. The first thing I want to talk about is the game's most obvious emphasis, which is the pacing. Starting from the very beginning of the game, you hit that new game, select a difficulty, and wait for the game to load. The game fades in, you're greeted by a creepy short narration about all the ass you're about to be clapping. Doomslayer starts busting out of his ancient chains, the mayhem and skull-crushing promptly begins right the fuck away. In my opinion, this is how you start a game. No need for an overly long introductory cutscene or a slice of boring exposition, just Doomslayer hopping out of bed and getting the fuck to work. You're immediately given control within seconds and you're letting loose on demons with your soon-to-be replaced sci-fi pistol of swiftiness. And I absolutely love it when a game can manage to minimalize its time spent on establishing the narrative and deliver that narrative by simply letting the player play the game and get your feet wet. Speaking of wet, an example of another game that does this is BioShock, where you just sort of crash down into Rapture and it's up to you to unravel the amazing plot as you play. Or hell, even Dark Souls, which doesn't really give you anything to go on. Now, that's not exactly how this game works, but the spirit remains the same. After you've blasted away at all the demons and get your hands on the sleek and sexy Praetor suit, you learn about what's going on. Demons are on Mars, humanity's in trouble, and you set out as the almighty Doomslayer on a mission to destroy the forces of hell on Mars and restore order. A mission that starts off with loads of momentum that the game never really loses.
I feel I should apologize for what's happened here.
Throughout the course of your upcoming romp through the demonic invasion of Mars and eventually hell itself, the game rarely stops for any breaks as you find yourself constantly hauling ass through these multi-layered battle arenas, shooting and glory-killing your way through each mission with your testosterone and blood pumping at high gear. The battles in this game are all about speed, traversing the arena in the most efficient possible ways using the smooth mobility system of jumping and climbing, while also knowing which big-ass gun from your big-ass arsenal is the most appropriate for dealing with the different types of enemies around you. If you try to stop and take cover or plan tactics like a typical FPS, you'll be punished for it, because Doom don't play that way. Doom is a very, very fast boy. But having said that, there are a lot of secrets to be found in the game, ones that I won't spoil here, but many of which are actually really cool and should definitely be sought after for players seeking a more holistic experience. You could easily argue that these secrets and hidden areas padded throughout the game can break the fast pace because you have to go out of your way to look for them and, look at your map and go find something, take a break from shooting shit for a while. And honestly, that's why I didn't spend too much time looking for secrets or other optional content. I just wanted to shoot demons and run fast. Fucking sue me. My point is, there's more to the game than just killing demons in various combat areas. You can collect codex entries that you can read to learn more about the lore or the demons. You can find these cute little Doom Guy dolls that eventually unlock classic maps for you. Rune trials, which serve as an awesome ass way to earn cool new abilities in the form of a trial, I guess. A lot of these things may seem distracting from the overarching theme of slaughtering demons super turbo style, but in the end, they actually add a lot of replay value and a sense of depth to a game that would be pretty shallow content-wise without these things. Not to mention, these optional endeavors always reward your efforts for completing them in satisfying ways, so they're far from pointless. So now that we've talked about Doom's pacing, let's talk about the gameplay as a whole. good. Like I said, Doom is all about hauling ass around the map and running and gunning and gunning and running and jumping and gunning and crushing and smashing and running. The game sets out to make you feel like a total badass immersed in a world of challenge, which is one of the best compliments I can think to even give a video game. As ferocious as you are as the Doomslayer, your enemies are equally aggressive and hectic to fight. As you rocket around these zigzaggy, non-linear level areas, you're unloading your big-ass guns on big-ass demons while picking up health, armor, and ammo on the fly to keep the fight going. Doom's gameplay follows the most successful iteration of the less is more format in existence, and that the game does away with any and all unnecessary mechanics that have become commonplace in most shooters, places heavy emphasis on what makes shooters so much fun to begin with. For example, there's no reload mechanic in Doom, and that really threw me off when I first started playing because I've become so used to manually reloading in shooters out of necessity. But in Doom, they realized that it wasn't really necessary because it would disrupt the epic flow of epic combat. There's no sprint button either because Doom guy is always sprinting. My man hauls ass on his own time. He don't need no damn button. There's no sight aiming unless you get certain weapon mods, which we'll talk about in a bit. And honestly, the lack of all of these superfluous features in exchange for a game that embraces the full throttle action and spirit of a classic FPS just feels fucking awesome. As you've probably noticed, once you deal enough damage to an enemy, they start glowing all blue and orange and shit. When this happens, you get the melee button to tap tap taparoo and you score what's called a glory kill. Glory kills in a lot of ways are the bread and butter of Doom combat. Not only do you get a concise and sick animation of Doom guy absolutely fucking a demon shit up, you're also rewarded with health pickups, which are necessary to pick up continuously so you can keep on dooming it up. I love the glory kills because I feel like they're just perfectly implemented into the game, not only as a complement to the run and gun style shooting, but also as a rewarding and uninterrupting way to mix up the combat in a purposeful way. You do the cool thing, you get rewarded based on the difficulty of the enemy, and you have fun and you feel satisfied when you do it. And not only are glory kills important to the gameplay and lend themselves as a necessity amidst Doom's intense balls-to-the-wall gunplay, it's a ton of fun and the brief, sexy animation does nothing to interrupt the fast flow, which again, is a big plus. Aside from the glory killing, which is one of my all-time favorite mechanics in an FPS to date, Doom gives you what is in my opinion one of the most memorable arsenals of big-ass, ballsy-ass guns I've ever had the pleasure of clapping cheeks with. Seriously, the weapons in this game make Halo look like Kirby's Dreamland, and it's no secret obviously that the Doom franchise has always been about big, badass guns, but the weapons in Doom 2016 are especially outstanding, for the most part, and I want to talk about them a little bit more. This is an exceptionally rare statement coming from me, but I liked every gun in this game, and I found every one of them useful at multiple points. The weapon mods for each gun, of which there are 2 mods per gun, all felt pretty solid, though there were certainly some that feel more useful than others, but we'll talk about that in a sec. You got your epic pistol, your basic shotgun, your super shotgun, your fucking cannon of an assault rifle that feels like it's gonna tear your hands off, a chain gun, a chainsaw, a plasma rifle, rocket launcher, Gauss cannon, the BFG, which stands for Big Funky Gnomes and eliminates every enemy around you, and something else I might be forgetting while writing this, but who gives a shit. Like I said, each gun comes with 2 unique mods that you acquire by beating the shit out of this poor robot, and the mods are pretty sweet. The shotgun can be upgraded with a grenade launcher and a 3-shell burst, the assault rifle can get a tactical scope and micro missiles that kick ass, the rocket launcher gets a 3-round lock-on, the list goes on and on and on. But a few of these mods just kinda suck in my opinion. Most of them are fucking great. But for example, the plasma rifle, which is admittedly my least favorite weapon in the game to begin with, has a stunner mod that stuns exactly 1 enemy at a time, which, in a fast-paced game like Doom, isn't exactly the most useful thing, especially in a game where focusing too much fire on one singular enemy can leave you in a vulnerable spot. Now again, that's just my opinion. You can upgrade the mod to work better, of course, but it still just feels janky compared to the other mods out there. Also, the chain gun also has this stupid mod that allows you to rotate the barrels to get rid of that lag between smashing the shoot button and unloading the chain gun. which is actually super useful and it's a great ammo saver. But I hate this mod because that's a function a chain gun should have automatically, and it's just a waste of what could have been an actual creative weapon mod. Now, that's not a huge beef I have with the game or anything, just a teeny tiny waste of potential that barely scars the gameplay at all. Like I said, for the most part, the weapon mods are great, and all I'm saying is some are noticeably better than others. While we're on the topic of weapons, another slight little criticism I have is that in the latter half of the game, about half your arsenal kind of falls off, and you end up leaning more so on your Gauss cannon, super shotgun, and your chain gun, more than anything, while the heavy assault rifle, the pistol, the combat shotgun, plasma rifle, all those guns just sort of become less effective in the late game, and you only end up using them when you're low on ammo and desperate, or when it calls for certain mods. The guns initially feel powerful as hell, but that power definitely starts to wane a little bit as the game goes on, which is something that can't really be criticized when it comes to games like Halo, but there's definitely an argument to be made for both sides. Doom puts a lot of emphasis on knowing which weapon you need to use for whatever enemies are around you specifically at that given point. I'm not going to spoil the gameplay nuances for anyone who hasn't played it, but every gun has an intended use that makes it really good at countering specific enemies. For example, the Gauss cannon is good at eliminating the flying ballsack monster whose name I can't pronounce. The chain gun is good crowd control as usual, but it's also good at slaughtering the Mancubus or the Hell Knights. My point is, because you have such a badass arsenal, this formula works with immaculate success in this game, as opposed to games like Halo or Call of Duty, where you're limited to only 2 weapons at a time. Not that there's anything wrong with that at all whatsoever, but you wouldn't get the same effect with Doom if you could only carry 2 guns at once instead of your entire weapon wheel at your disposal. Also, I think I need to clarify that literally none of the guns in this game suck. Even the plasma rifle, which yes is my least favorite, but it just really ended up being the weapon I happen to use the least. Let's take a minute and talk about the enemy design in this game. I don't have any issues to bring up in this area. As far as I'm concerned, Doom 2016 has some of the most memorably badass and creatively designed enemies I've ever encountered in a modern shooter. The demons of hell come in a massive variety of all shapes, sizes, quirks, and attacks. You've got your possessed, your imps, which I kind of hate to say because it sounds like a slur. Maybe it's just me. You got your Hell Knights, your Hell Barons, your Revenants, your Mancubus, your Cyber Mancubus, and like a dozen others that I can't remember at the top of my head, but they're fucking great too. Demons in this game are so fun to fight and require a variety of skills and tactics to keep up with each one of them. It's almost daunting if you've never played a game quite so fast-paced. Your enemies are angry, aggressive, and ruthless, and just as the game's opening monologue suggests,
they are rage, brutal, without mercy. But you will be worse. Rip and tear until it is done.
Not only are the standard enemies just a blast to face off against in the game's tightly designed arenas, the boss fights in this game are what really blew me away. There's only a few of them, but typically when I think of boss fights in first-person shooters, I get a pretty shitty taste in my mouth because of BioShock's final boss or Halo 3's Guilty Spark battle, but the bosses in this game are genuinely so awesome, I actually wanted to replay them a lot of the time. The Cyber Demon especially was just such a well-designed boss fight with such a cool-ass enemy, which shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone who's ever played a Doom game, but that boss fight alone is honestly reason enough to play this game if you're a fan of boss fights in general. Now what if I told you the gameplay had more to offer than romping through these open-ended levels and killing demons with sick-ass guns? Well, it does, and that comes in the form of rune trials and secret areas, which actually serve as fun and purposeful endeavors instead of just boring filler side content. When you come upon a rune trial, you're taken to a battle arena to complete a challenge, which could range from taking out enough enemies with a certain gun without moving around too much, killing enough enemies with explosive barrels, shit like that. And in exchange, you get a reward in the form of a rune. And these perks usually affect the gameplay in a way that feels pretty direct, which kind of leads into this neat little semi-RPG mechanic the game has going. Now, I do have some issues with rune trials. I think a lot of them are just designed poorly or with artificial difficulty in mind. There's always a really stringent time limit on these things and tons of limitations and rules to whatever you're doing and oftentimes the rune you're rewarded with seems so arbitrary, you often wonder why you even bothered putting up with the trial at all, because some of them are just downright fucking hard, or they involve a ton of trial and error. While we're on the topic of RPG subtleties, you can pick up these little glass Sauron orbs to upgrade your health, armor, or ammo capacity, Praetor tokens to upgrade your suit with various active and passive perks, and some of the coolest hidden areas that exist in a video game that, again, I won't spoil here. But the level of detail is honestly pretty unprecedented considering what game this is. Don't get me wrong, all of these elements kind of exist on the lower end of the totem pole compared to what the rest of the game has to offer, and you can easily overlook just about all of it during your first playthrough, but they add a neat little touch of depth to the game regardless. That being said, however, during my first playthrough, I ended up with an absolute monkey nuts pile of weapon upgrade points that I just never felt the urge to use, but that's not saying the upgrades aren't useful. I guess what I'm saying is that some of the RPG mechanics don't really necessitate themselves a whole lot, which isn't a bad thing because this isn't an RPG, but I personally think it would have been cool to see a slightly more committed system where perks for your weapons and armor become something you seek out more actively. So that kind of segues into the next thing I want to talk about, the game's difficulty. I played the game on Hurt Me Plenty for my initial playthrough, which is essentially the game's normal difficulty, and Ultra Violence for my second run, and I just felt like the difficulty on Ultra Violence was perfect. To be clear, the game has a total of 5 difficulty settings, and Ultra Violence is the third one, sort of akin to playing Halo on Heroic, I guess. But seriously, from a challenge perspective, Doom 2016 really hit the spot for me in terms of its consistent progression through the campaign and its constant yet ever-adjusting sense of balance. I wouldn't describe the game as straight up hard, though if you're not the most seasoned beef patty of first-person shooters, it's pretty likely you'll suck some dick at Doom, at least at first. The game is definitely challenging. Throughout my run on Ultra Violence, I died a decent bit, but I never felt like the game had fucked me over with any artificial bullshit, with the exception of a few random platforming and climbing segments that I really didn't like. But the combat itself is just a welcome change of pace from more recent shooters that often just feel like they have a big on-rails easy button. So moving on, let's talk about the story and the setting of Doom. I won't lie to you, this is probably going to be the least important part of this review and the least detailed, but that does not mean that Doom 2016 has a bad story. I actually really like the story, but there just isn't much to talk about. Doom 2016 takes place on Mars in a future where humanity is plundering around looking for fuel resources. A genius scientist named Samuel Hayden and his research crew discover what's called Argent Energy by opening portals into Hell. But things go to poopy shithole when one of Hayden's people, Olivia Pierce, decides to start a cult and literally make a deal with the devil and releases demons on the facility, which is where you, the Doomslayer, come into play. The story is simple, it's fun, and it's more than serviceable for the gameplay. It isn't deep or memorable or revolutionary in any way, but it's a great supplement to the campaign regardless, even though I'm sure a bolder and more memorable story would have made this game even better. I'm not really of the belief that every story needs to be thought-provoking or super substantial, and especially in the case of Doom here, a story centered around justifying your grisly onslaught of demons is definitely good enough for me. In terms of the setting, the game has you mowing through various parts of Mars and Hell alike. For the most part, I liked the Mars levels a lot, but they felt a little bit repetitive scenery and arena-wise compared to the Hell levels, which felt a lot less linear and samey, I guess. The Hell levels feel a lot like homages to old-school 90s Doom, where you're often looking for various keys in the form of skulls to progress from arena to arena, which I personally enjoyed a lot because even when I would get lost, I'd end up finding a worthwhile secret or something. The levels on Mars, which is where the girth of the game takes place, I mean, they're fine and all, and I honestly can't think of a mission in this entire game that I didn't enjoy, but the constant atmosphere of this sci-fi futuristic base is something I feel like we've seen a million times or so by now, and oftentimes the environments outside of the combat arenas just don't really feel very different. Alright, well that section was fucking short, so let's move on to the audio and visual design details of Doom 2016. I'm sure you've noticed by now, but Doom 2016 has an absolutely amazing soundtrack. The music is literally orgasmic, and I cannot recommend enough that you play this game with your headset. Turn that shit up loud. Nothing gets your blood pumping like going ape titties on some bad guys to this hardcore heavy metal rampage inducing shit. The soundtrack is just yeah, oh my, it's just so fucking good. Aside from that, the overall sound design of the game is pretty damn good too. Weapons sound good, demons all sound different, and the various environmental effects are surprisingly detailed. As for the visuals, the game looks great consistently, and I'd even argue that some of the later levels are more visually splendid than the earlier ones, which is really cool because a lot of games nowadays kinda tend to blow their load on cool looking shit early on, and the rest of the game just feels kinda lackluster in comparison. But that's not the case here. Doom's initial series of levels might seem a teensy bit repetitive in the way of scenery, but as you progress through the bowels of hell and the deeper reaches of the UAC research complex, you're gonna see some pretty jaw-dropping shit the whole way. id Software clearly takes pride in the way their guns look, and with guns like these, I can't blame them. Every time Doom Guy picks up a new gun, he takes a second to check the bad boy out, load it up, show off all the cool details. But I think one of the coolest things about Doom 2016 is how the atmosphere just feels like a modernization of a classic Doom game, if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, I apologize. I'm not exactly sure how to describe what the fuck I'm saying because I'm a goddamn horsefly. Long story short, the game has great audio and visual design that I can't really point any major holes into. However, I will say there were quite a bit of texture pop-ins that would happen right after loading screens, and given that the loading screens in this game are unusually long anyway, that's kinda questionable, but as I think back on all my time playing the game, I can't remember a single frame drop or any real technical issue that affected gameplay, so I'd rather have some brief and minor texture fuckery than the usual Bethesda casserole. So moving on to our final review topic, let's look at just how much content Doom has to offer. All I've been talking about in this video so far is the single player campaign, and that's all I'm gonna talk about because I haven't actually played the multiplayer or the snap map mode yet, but I do know that those modes exist, so instead of incorporating them fully into my review here, I'm just gonna treat them as optional content that exists alongside the campaign with no effect on my review score at all. So now we know that Doom has two other modes besides the single player campaign. Let's look at the campaign content as a big fat whole. Overall, if you play through the game at a moderate pace, it'll probably take you around 8 to 10 hours to beat, depending on your difficulty. However, chasing all the optional content throughout each level is a whole different igloo of penguins. We've already been over all the secrets and hidden areas and all that, but the completionist's list of getting everything there is to be done in this game is a lot longer than meets the eye. You've got your mission challenges, which rewards you with weapon upgrade points for doing certain things throughout the level. You can use those points to make your weapon mods more effective. You've got your classic maps for a heaping dose of nostalgia. All this shit to add to your sense of discovery and reward, which is great because I think this game would still be amazing with just the Rudy Tooty McShooty, but we get replay value in addition to that. Another thing I didn't go into much detail about are the armor upgrades, which you get from Praetor tokens, which again act as perks that can upgrade your environmental resistance, your area scanning, and grenade recharge, among other things. All these things in tandem, the weapon mods, the upgrades, the Praetor suit perks, the runes, all that crap, it not only has a keen effect on the gameplay, but it makes the game way more engaging and progress driven. Because of these features alone, I had a hard time putting this game down at times, and I've even been dedicating a lot of time to pursuing trophies in this game on the PS4 version, which is something I never ever do, because I'm probably the person on this planet who cares about trophies and achievements the least. But something about Doom 2016 has really awakened my innermost completionist, and with a game that's this much fun to play, I'm 100% here for it. I guess to wrap this section up with a neat little bow, Doom 2016's single player experience has a lot to offer, and I never get tired of it. The campaign is one of those rare ones that I'm always down to fire up and play from the beginning, and it never feels repetitive. For some context, I've been playing this game for just over a year now, and I haven't quite put it down ever since. And like I said, I haven't even touched the multiplayer or snap map modes, but I'm sure those add their own special layers to the cake as well. Alright, so now we've pretty much got Doom 2016 all summed up in a mostly spoiler-free way, as if that even matters, but we have one very important and very simple question to ask ourselves, a question that lends itself as the verdict for every video game ever made. Is Doom 2016 a fun game? Because in the words of Reggie Fils-Aimé, if it isn't fun, what's the fucking point? Well, I don't know if you've noticed, buddy, but I'm pretty much in love with this fucking game. Absolutely, it is amazingly fun, and the entire game is bent over backwards to deliver on that premise. The game is more fun than going to your grandma's house when you were 6 years old. The game is essentially a never-ending gamer orgasm, and the combat alone will take your virginity. The story is more than serviceable, with some surprisingly impressive cinematic moments, despite the game not taking a hard stance on telling it. The level areas feature so much non-linear verticality that you can get lost looking for secrets or just trampoline around the map, swapping and dropping. The side content is fun and purposeful rather than feeling like a big fat shoehorn. The light RPG-like mechanics make the game feel more polished and complete, and overall, I just don't have a whole lot to complain about with Doom 2016 as a whole. The game is absolutely fantastic, albeit not a flawless game. My issues with this game remind me of an incredible sports car that has maybe one or two very small, unnoticeable scratches on the paint, or maybe just like a luxury feature that doesn't always work or something. My single greatest problem with the game is the load times. I played on the standard PS4, and like I said, the game runs fantastic, and I didn't have a single bit of frame droppage at all. But the loading screens, although they look pretty fucking awesome, took upwards of 2 minutes sometimes, even longer for some of the more robust levels, which is just lame in a fast-paced game like this. I also had mixed feelings about how some of the weapons started to feel late game, which I already touched on, but I think there's an argument to be made on both ends there, so I don't really take that as an objective issue with the game. To put this review to bed and give Doom 2016 a score on my IGN-like 1 to 10 scale, I'm giving Doom 2016 a 9 out of 10. The game is amazing. If you've yet to play Doom 2016 and you're a fan of first-person shooters, this game will change your fucking life. It'll make playing games like Call of Duty and Battlefield seem arbitrary, and especially with Doom Eternal coming out in November, I honestly can't recommend this game enough to anyone looking to either hype themselves up or familiarize themselves with the series to begin with. The game has almost no serious problems that hold it back from what it's supposed to be, which is a badass game about making you feel like a badass slayer of demons. Thank you guys for watching my first actual review. I know a lot of it was probably super disjointed because this was the first review I've ever written, but I thank you for bearing with me, and I hope you enjoyed my banter nonetheless. If you enjoyed the video, well hey, that's cool. I'll likely make some more videos like this, so if you guys want to tune in, go ahead and do it, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time.
I'm willing to take full responsibility for the horrible events of the last 24 hours, but you must understand. Our interest in their world was purely for the betterment of mankind. Everything has clearly gotten out of hand now, yes. But it was worth the risk.